Welcome, everyone, to our Leafline podcast. Thanks for joining us across the way.
So happy you're here with us today.
We really are. Across the way, 6 miles away, is Ben Akina, otherwise known as Ben Akina. He is director of all things, just all things, technological worship and helping me with amazing details.
I manipulate the ones and the zeros.
And then I'm Brian Scott Ralston, associate to the pastor here at Centenary Church, as well as many other roles that I have. So, welcome into Leafline. Thanks for joining us. We have a few updates, but
we have to wait for the
little jingle.
Can I get an update?
Can I get an update? All right. So, we have some weird updates for you this week. Well, not really. The updates are, we're still in the same pandemic we were last week and still under the same conditions.
We're still in Punxsutawney.
No in-person worship services.
You get it,
this
Brian?
is once again Groundhog Day,
yes.
Pandemic Day. Of course I got it, even though I grew up near that terrible town. Yes, so we are no in-person worship services. We have live streaming at 9 o'clock on Sunday mornings. Please join us for that. We have
fire engines.
Fire engines in the background. Welcome to Centenary. If you don't believe we're recording at Centenary, just listen for the sirens. You'll hear them. Centenary, again, was relocated to this location about 60 years ago, a little more than 63 years ago, to come to a tranquil place of worship. Yeah, because downtown Modesto was too loud and crazy, so they moved here for a tranquil place of worship. But I digress. In-person worship service is still not happening. Live streaming is this weekend. Please join us for that. But we do have an exciting little update. We are approved for some outside event type stuff, providing we're following our pandemic protocols for the in-person worship services. If you remember all those, we're going to be trying an event outside for the closing finale of Vacation Bible School. So if you stay tuned for that, pray for that. VBS is starting Sunday, August 2nd. It'll be a mostly streaming event on the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday nights. But then on the Thursday night, we're going to have an in-person event here for the families and the children with social distancing, masks, and all sorts of other fun restrictions. But we're at least going to be able to do something here on the outside of our beautiful property, the courtyard. And that will hopefully help teach us how to do this so we can do some other events later, including, Sunday morning.
By the way, as always, please, the Leaf Brief gets sent out every Friday. And if you miss everything else on Facebook and YouTube and the website during the week, the Leaf Brief will have all of that stuff just tightly packaged. If you're not receiving the Leaf Brief, please email us at centenary1911@gmail.com and we can get you added to that list. In fact, if you want to talk to us for any reason, centenary1911@gmail.com.
Recommendations, give it a try.
Hey, Brian, what you reading? What you watching?
Hi, Ben. So what I'm reading / listening to is I'm back into my memoir phase where I'm listening to biographies, autobiographies, all that kind of good stuff. So
phase again.
I haven't made it through this yet, but Alex Trebek has an interesting book out, and it's called The Answer Is... Yeah. And part of it's about his journey through cancer, which I don't know why I'm reading books about people going through cancer, but I find them fascinating. So Alex Trebek has a good book that I'm working my way through, listening through. And then I also read a weird one. Ben Folds, a musician from the 90s and early 2000s. Most of you don't know who I'm talking about, but...
he basically plays a piano like it's a railroad spike.
Yes, he's quite an amazing musician in many ways. But I, for some reason, read his book. Part of this is I get him for free, so I think that's tempting. I just come across weird things. And so Dream About Lightning Bugs is what that's called. And so those were actually good. And I'm just enjoying just kind of weird things like that right now. And then the other thing, which is strange, and I guess I'll recommend this even, Looney Tunes, the classic Looney Tunes. I don't know if you're aware of this, but... a certain bunny turned 80 this past week. Earlier, I believe the 27th of July was the 80th birthday of Bugs Bunny. So if you're older than Bugs Bunny, congratulations. But most of us are younger than Bugs Bunny, and he's been around for 80 years. So I actually went back and just for fun, I was checking out some Looney Tunes classics. So
Mel Blanc is amazing, isn't he?
Yeah, Mel Blanc's incredible. So
he's just... absurdly talented, that guy.
As a kid, I was astounded that was one dude. That was one voice that voiced a lot
Brian,
of
people might not be as interested in this as you or I, so please tell the folks at home 1 or 2 or 12 of Mel Blanc's characters. Is it Blanc or Blanc?
I always said Blanc, but I don't know. Maybe it's Blanc. Depends if you're French,
Mel.
I suppose. Mel. Good old Mel. Yeah, Bugs Bunny was his most famous one, but he did all those friends of Bugs as well. So Elmer Fudd and Daffy Duck, and a good friend of mine who grew up in China actually refers to Daphne Duck, which confused me because I don't know who Daphne Duck is, but Daffy Duck I know. Similar to some of the great voice actors, very forgotten in many ways. Frank Oz, I think, was the guy that did Yoda and a bunch of the other characters. Piggy. Jim Henson, and then Hank Azaria. Lots of great voice actors.
Hank Azaria?
Sorry.
Sorry, there's no N. He's not Armenian.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Mel Blanc. So there you go. What are you reading, watching?
I finished the Ichabod recently. It was that online story that J.K. Rowling was releasing in chapters. The ending was really, really great. It got surprisingly poignant, and the whole thing had some social commentary throughout, but she really kind of brought it home at the end and just sort of made some really interesting statements about society in general. And my wife and I, we were gifted with an afternoon off. A good friend of the family decided to take our boy out for an afternoon, and so we got to sit down and say, hey, let's watch more than 10 minutes of something right now. And we decided to sit down and watch Much Ado About Nothing. And this particular version we watched is directed by one of my favorite television creators, a guy named Joss Whedon, who also directed the first Avengers movie in 2012. And so the interesting thing is Avengers was the biggest thing in the world when it came out. It was one of the biggest projects ever. It was the culmination of, I think, 4 other movies, 5 maybe, that brought into this one story. It was this massive special effects blockbuster. It caught fire with the whole world. Joss Whedon, when he finished that, had a few weeks off, so he decided to get a bunch of his Hollywood friends together and film a black and white version of a Shakespeare play at his own house.
Just
and
for
he released
fun.
It as a movie, just for fun.
That's awesome.
Because that's what he loves to do. The acting, it's by a bunch of Californian actors that were not really built to play Shakespeare, so a lot of the acting is not superb, but there's some performances that are just really, really wonderful and lovely. But we finished that after a second session of viewing, and we kind of turned to each other, what do you want to watch next? And we decided to watch the version of Much Ado About Nothing directed by Kenneth Branagh. We're about halfway through that one now. And that one, the acting is just, it's a flight above what we were watching from the American version, except for Keanu Reeves.
Oh my.
So this Shakespeare movie features Keanu Reeves and Denzel Washington and Michael Keaton and Emma Thompson. It's just all over the place, and it's really been fun. It's been fun watching those write together and seeing these different interpretations of these well-known characters and specific lines of dialogue, the way a director approaches them differently, the way an actor approaches them differently, and the different layers of meaning that get brought out. So I've really, really been enjoying that, and that brings it to my Give It a Try for the week. If there's anybody listening to this podcast that happens to love Shakespeare, the Royal Shakespeare Company released a version of Hamlet, I think in 2009. It might have been 2013. I don't remember what it was, but it features Sir Patrick Stewart and David Tennant. I'm a big Doctor Who fan, or at least I was a few years ago before Peter Capaldi. But this production of Hamlet was just really, really wonderful. It brought things to life. I've been very familiar with Hamlet. I've seen maybe 5 or 6 different movie versions of it before. And this version brought different layers of meaning out of the dialogue than I've heard before. There's a lot of problematic lines in pretty much every one of Shakespeare's works that just don't really translate well to modern audiences. There's a moment where Hamlet says, Polonius says, okay, I'm going to go away from you. I'm going to leave your company. I'm going to take my company from you. And Hamlet says, nothing you could take from me that I would more willingly part with all, except my life, except my life, except my life. And that's a really strange line to play, to repeat the same phrase 3 times. And that one in particular in this movie, I was just blown away by how David Tennant approached that and delivered it, and how each except my life had a completely different tone. And yeah,
so
it was
you go.
Just cool. If you're a super absurd nerd like me, Royal Shakespeare Company's Hamlet featuring Sir Patrick Stewart and David Tennant.
Now you know why he's director of all things nerd-related here at Centenary, because he just knows these things. So give that a try.
See, you guys were all wasting time having friends when you were a kid.
Exactly.
So, Brian, do you have to give it a try for us? It's okay if you don't.
I don't. So
fine. You get nothing from Brian this week.
Yeah, nothing.
Just a story.
Read the
Speaking
Bible.
Of which,
that's my example.
Brian recommends the Bible.
Yeah.
He does.
Trivia.
Well, yeah.
Trivia.
Trivia?
You want to do trivia instead of stories?
Oh, sorry.
What do you want to do first?
Stories.
Story time, 'cause the lockdown is boring.
Stories.
No, well, no, I want to do trivia first.
Okay, we're doing trivia.
Trivia.
You're cutting this out.
No, I'm going to play all
Okay,
of the
good.
jingles.
Because we got the story to go into the main topic again next week.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
I sound like an old,
Well,
upset
you sound like you're
Jewish
doing
man.
it on stage. Like, people are going to hear that part.
Okay.
Okay. History's pivot points was last week's trivia question. And the question, historians credit an Austrian archduke's assassination in 1914 as the most direct cause of World War I. What was that archduke's name? I know it.
All right.
Brian knows it.
I'm going to rant for a moment. I thought that was so obvious. I was like, I knew that when I was 4 or 5. But apparently not, because nobody else emailed in. So either you know it and you thought it was as obvious as I did, so you didn't bother emailing, or you don't know it. So if
We're
you
going
don't
to
know
let
it,
this one ride
that's
for
okay.
another week. We want somebody to answer. We're okay if it's a wrong answer. We're okay if you cheated and used the Goog. Go
Right.
for it. We just, yeah.
Well, we did have one other question last week, Ben.
That's right.
With
The
a
category
correct
was
answer.
Bibla.
Yay!
Among the categories of Bible books are epistles, poetry books, prophecy books, and others. Within the prophecy category, there is a further distinction made between major prophets and minor prophets. What is the difference between the major prophets and the minor prophets? We got to hear from Greg Demers, who I was delighted to hear from. I didn't know he was listening. He wrote, major prophets are the big books, long-winded, many pages. Minor ones have fewer pages in the Bible. Absolutely correct.
And by the
Nailed
way,
it.
Greg, Isaiah is going to smack you when he meets you in heaven. And
Not
so is
my
Daniel.
son, the prophet
So
he's speaking of.
The prophets will beat you up for saying they're long-winded. But they really are. So thank you for calling them out on that. Ezekiel, yeah, we're talking to you. So thanks for getting that, Greg, and everybody else who knew it but didn't email in. Why aren't you emailing in?
So
Send
the
your
Austrian
answers in.
Archduke question is going to ride for another week. We're looking for an answer for that one. But we do also have a new question this week. Brian, the category, I don't have a category.
Geography.
Geography.
Historic geography.
Or
just
historiography.
That too.
Okay. So, Turkey's thriving port city of Istanbul was a cultural mecca over 1,000 years before anyone even heard of New York. But it was once known by another name. What 4th century Roman emperor was its former namesake? And you can write to us with that answer at centenary1911@gmail.com.
Story time, 'cause the lockdown is boring.
Story time. The lockdown is boring. Make your clicks or do something so you know where this is.
Welcome to the first time we've attempted the story time segment today.
Yeah, exactly. So, most of you know I've had a number of surgeries in my life, and one of those famous times, Cindy, my blessed sister, drove me to Sacramento for an eye surgery. We're waiting in the pre-op area, and Cindy and I, most of you know, have pretty snarky senses of humor. And
What?
Yeah, I know that surprises you. So, but we were chatting and just having a normal brother-sister talk, and the pre-op person came out, the nurse came out to get me to take me to pre-op, and she looked at Cindy. Mind you, she interrupts our conversation. We're having an adult conversation talking about Jesus and church, I'm sure, very important things. So this nurse interrupts us, this attendant, maybe she wasn't a nurse, but she interrupts us. She looks at Cindy and says, it's time to take him back for pre-op. Does he have to go to the bathroom? And I kid you not, without missing a beat, Cindy turns to me and in a very loud voice, she kind of shouts, "Do you have to go to the bathroom?" And I just bust up laughing because this to me is hysterical. Cindy's laughing, I'm laughing, and the poor little medical tech is totally confused. What she was doing was assuming because I have one disability, I must have many disabilities, and thus the fact that I can't see means that maybe I can't talk or can't think for myself or things like that, and she has to talk to my caregiver, who happened to be my sister. But my sister and I, being who we are, yeah, we have to make fun and make light of that situation because it was just one of those moments. I said the only thing that could have made it better if she'd grabbed my hand and just started like,
What, Helen Kellering in your hand?
Helen Kellering in my palm and just writing things out with her fingers just to communicate and assign. Yeah, it would have been awesome. But yeah, there's many situations like that. If you know me, I'm very comfortable talking about my disability, but I'm also comfortable making light of it at times and making light of awkward situations like that, because those situations can get really embarrassing and difficult, and they don't need to be, because the tech didn't mean anything harmful. She just didn't know, or maybe she made assumptions she shouldn't have made, but it's not my job to punish her and make her feel terrible But it is my job to make it's Cindy's job, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So it's my job to again treat things with humor and grace. In that case, humor. So yeah, so there are many, many fun little stories like that. Ben's been a part of several of them, but
good ones.
Yeah. So
are we main topic?
Main topic.
Main topic.
We are main topicing.
So we have sort of talked about the pandemic in various main topics on this podcast, but one of the things that we started realizing more recently is that the end may not be in sight. And that's a terrible thing to have to say, but there's been kind of this waiting game going on the entire time of, I'd really like to do this, but I'll just wait until the world gets normal again. I'll just wait because soon things will be back to normal. It won't be 2 weeks, but it'll be 6 weeks. It won't be 6 weeks, but it'll be maybe just be 2 months. It'll just be 3. And we don't know at this point. And it's sort of forcing us into this headspace of having to grapple with the ongoing reality of lockdown living and the fact that we may not know when it'll return to what we'd like to call normal, what we'd like to think of as normal. And there's so many different ways of embracing that information and that knowledge. It's not a fun thing to have to embrace, but there's definitely right ways and wrong ways to do it.
Yeah, exactly. We're in a marathon, not a sprint, and we all thought it might be a sprint or it might be just a long 10K, but the reality is we don't know when it's going to end, and we don't know what normal is going to be like if ever it returns. And so this has reminded us, and we've talked about this before, of the grieving process and how sometimes when you go through grief, you kind of wait for normal to come back, but it never comes back. And we always come up with that phrase that I dislike, a new normal. But that is a reality of what happens, in that you work through the stages of grief and eventually you come to a new normal. And so we thought it'd be helpful just to kind of talk through that today. The stages of grief are not in any way biblical in the sense of they're not, inerrant or without.
This doesn't come from the Sermon of the Mount.
Right. This is not Jesus saying this. This is just the common observations from much psychology and much studies about grieving. There are 5 stages, and I make sure I call them stages. They're not steps in the sense of this is not a sequential process of if you take step 1, then step 2, then step 3. It doesn't work like that. There's stages that you move in and out of and sometimes all around, and so it's not meant to be...
Sometimes you don't do them in the same order.
Right. And grieving is a very unique and sort of individualized experience. So these in no way will necessarily be a prescription or a formula or even a cycle necessarily. But we found them to be pretty interesting during the pandemic. So think with me about the 5 stages of grieving and how you might have seen these or experienced these in the pandemic.
Have you observed these on social media and discussions with people on the news? When you're watching CNN and there's 12 people talking in little boxes. And I feel like I'm seeing these all over the place. Well, I'm seeing the first 4 for sure.
Yeah. So the 5 stages of grief, as they're commonly understood, we start with denial. You seen any denial lately? Anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So think about those 4. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Think about how you may have seen those. And Ben, how have you seen those in yourself, in our culture, and others?
I see these in the mirror all the time. For me, not so much denial. I went through some denial in the early phases because, it was reasonable to be in denial in the first week or the first 2 weeks. Because how many times, Brian, in the last 10 years have we heard about some new plague that's going to overtake the entire world?
Yep.
What was it? SARS, chicken flu, bird flu?
Right.
Chicken pox flu, whatever it was called.
Yeah.
H1N1.
Yep.
Was it West Nile virus?
West Nile, Ebola.
It became a very popular news cycle thing to talk about this new disease that was going to take the world by storm. And we've heard it. But then this new one comes along that really does become the first ever truly global pandemic. And I still see people in denial about it. Now, I'm not going to be super discussion guy about this because I'm not terribly informed. But I feel like when we don't know, and I think no one truly knows the full extent of it, no one knows the best way to deal with it, it seems like all the greatest scientific minds are either arguing with each other or not coming to any really solid conclusions. So the value of me being a part of that conversation and trying to explain to my neighbors why I'm right about the virus and they're not,
Yeah, no, it's not worth your time. But it is an interesting stage that we go through, and you see it all around you. Anger is one I identify with because I have, in my own unique way, I don't often show anger in front of other people, but I've gotten angry a lot about the pandemic and about what it does and what we have to do now. Even at church, I found myself getting very angry at so many things that we have to do because of this reality now, and how difficult it's made so many things for so many people. And I have gotten angry at what has been lost. And so many people have lost just significant things, be it from high school graduations, college graduations, weddings, funerals, vacations of a lifetime, all sorts of things. And so not only have I gotten angry about my own stuff, but I've gotten angry on behalf of my friends who didn't get their big anniversary trip to Italy, or my friends that didn't get to celebrate the life of their beloved, parent who passed away.
The teenagers who I've known at this church since 6th grade that don't get to have their senior trip, their senior prom, their high school graduation.
Yeah, and many of you are just grieving the loss of Redwood Christian Park, and no family camp this year, no family vacations, and many of you are struggling with no going back to school this fall.
No break from your children when they go back to school.
Be it a teacher, be it a grandparent, a parent, be it children themselves. We're grieving this different reality, and that can show up in anger. And for me, that's one of the ways I've experienced it. Yeah, that's a big stage that I've been kind of going back to on a regular basis, which I don't like, but it's just the reality.
I definitely felt anger about when churches got officially shut down by the state.
Yeah.
And the thing I kept coming back to was you can't make the rule followers limit their lives so much that you offset the decisions of the people that are just not taking it seriously at all. Like, you can't shut down churches to the point where the people that are still hanging out with their friends, So
exactly. It's caused all sorts of that.
It might be reasonable for me to say that. It might even be fair for me to say that. It's not helpful for me to say that.
Right. Yeah. Bargaining has shown up a lot as we've tried to niddle our way through and figure out, can I do this? Can I get away with this? Maybe I can do that. And we almost want to bargain with the pandemic at times. Okay, if we just behave ourselves and shut down our economy and shut down our churches for this long, then it'll be okay. No, it's not. And, it's been this very difficult thing on so many levels as we've tried to bargain individually and as a culture and as governments. It's just crazy. Depression, I don't know about you, but that's been a battle for me too.
Yeah. I didn't deal with that early on. Early on, I was excited at the challenge of doing ministry under lockdown. That is not a new and fun thing anymore. And lately it's just been wondering, how long is this going to go on? Like, how much will normal life be changed forever after this? And I'm not saying it will for sure. What I am saying is now I don't know. Now I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And now there's no point in any of us saying, well, it'll probably be over in 6 months, because we don't know.
We don't know. Right. And just very similar to losing a loved one, sometimes that is, you reach that dark night of the soul and you're just kind of going, I don't know if this is ever going to be better. And you start feeling that deep sort of sorrow. And we're not talking clinical depression necessarily or diagnosable depression, but that deep level
It's definitely not a word we should take lightly.
No. Yeah. So I'm not trivializing that word, but it's the Psalm 23:4, where though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, sometimes you're in the darkest valley, death's shadow, and it feels like you're taking up residence there. It feels like you're building a condo there and you're going to be there forever. And you just get that down feeling like this will never pass. I'm always going to be this sad and this down, this discouraged, this dark. And there's no hope. And you can't see a light at the end of the tunnel because, you feel stuck. And that's not a healthy place to be. But that's where a lot of folks that I'm aware of right now are kind of stuck in that depression stage. And finally, acceptance. And I don't think a lot of us have worked to that stage quite yet, but yeah, that would be a dream in a lot of ways. We don't know what that looks like again.
I think a lot of us reach acceptance every once in a while.
Yeah. And you kind of just shrug your shoulders and just go, okay, I can focus only on what I can focus on, which is the choices in front of me and the little things I can control today. So maybe that's a version of acceptance where I'm just going, okay, I need to focus on what's in front of me for today and the things that I do have control over. The rest of it, I cannot concern myself with today. So that has actually helped me. Maybe that's an expression of acceptance where I've just chosen And that's made my days much better when I actually can get that focus of, okay, what in this day can I actually do to show the love of Jesus, to help another person, to get out of my own head, and just to do my life responsibilities that I can do today, pay my bills or whatever. And then also, how can I be a help to someone else today? That can help a ton as well. So maybe that's a way of showing acceptance, but yeah.
And I think without reaching that level of acceptance, it's very difficult to do anything valuable. It's very difficult to do anything that's helpful for other people. Because it seems like those other 4 stages, I don't mean to say self-indulgent in the sense of a person being selfish, but they are inward focused.
Yeah. Yeah, because they're related to grief, because grief is a very personal wound, and it's a deep personal struggle. And so the stages of grief reflect that reality, that you have to work through that and understand that you can't stay there. You don't want to stay there, because it is very inward focused, and thus you need to find a way to process through it. And I guess that's what I ultimately want to say is, what do you do with all this? This is the reality. I think it's what we see around us in our culture, and it's what we see in our community and in our families and friends. So what do you do with it? Do you just kind of get stuck in those stages? We move through those stages to and fro. It's not like it's not like I reach acceptance and I just stay there. No, I tend to reach it and then bounce back into one of the other ones. But what do we do with that reality? And I think that's where we want to give a bit of hope, because I think God is the one unchanging reality. The Bible is secure. What it teaches will not let you down and will not change. God, Father, Son, Spirit will be your rock, your strength, your shelter, even in the midst of this uncertain time.
Pastor Tim told us a story today that he did not give us permission to share, but it's pretty innocuous, where he was on his way to work and he got stopped to have a conversation with somebody. And his active mind was thinking, well, I have to get to work because I have a staff meeting Zoom at this time and I've got all these things to do. And he felt very clearly the voice of God talking to him saying, yeah, but look what I put in front of you right now. Yeah. Yes, you've got other plans. Yes, this is inconvenient. Yes, you had things that you wanted to get accomplished, but I speak to you in all kinds of ways. And Pastor Tim talked about how this conversation that he had with this person was wonderful. Yeah. And how it was so uplifting to him personally. And I think there's some merit in that kind of a thought process. Is the lockdown good? In my opinion, no. I think coronavirus has been horrible. I think that the thought of this just being life moving forward for an indefinite amount of time, life will going to look like this, I find personally horrifying. It seems unfair. It feels unfair. Okay, fine. What are you going to do about it? Right. You're here either way. And knowing that it's unfair and feeling the injustice of it all doesn't help any of us accomplish anything. Certainly the work that God has created us and planned for us ahead in advance to do. So what do we do now? Right. And I think of so many situations where an individual has been struck with a terrible health situation, with cancer, with all sorts of things. And is it unfair? In many ways, yeah. Suffering is no respecter of age or position or merit or anything. Suffering just hits, and sometimes the way that person is choosing to face up to their trial and face up to this horrible situation makes a big difference, and it has a significant impact on those around them. And I think we can take examples, we can take encouragement from that, because you redeem the bad. This is that trusting Romans 8:28, that God will work for the good in all of these circumstances for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. God will work for the good. He will find a way to turn the tragedy into a treasure. Doesn't mean he'll make it good necessarily for you right this second. It's not a promise of sunshine and light. It's a promise that nothing will be wasted in the end. The reality is God will work through all of this. If you trust him and take that perspective, it can really help. And you can understand that even though this is rough and unfair, in many ways very difficult, God has a purpose and a plan, and you may be looking at divine appointments throughout your day, and maybe it's someone that you can talk with, someone you can encourage, someone you can help, or someone that can help and encourage you. But God is at work, and we need to trust that, and we need to step up and seize this opportunity, and that's a hard thing to do, but God will empower us to do it. The situation is not fair, it's not fun, it's not good, it's infuriating. So the question becomes, Are you denying it? Are you angry about it? Are you trying to bargain with it? Are you in depression over it? Or are you using this opportunity to say, here I am, Lord, what do you have to say to me?
Yeah. Yeah. And it kind of ties what we talked about last week in the idea that God works through brokenness, God works through flawed and failed humans, us. And so this is another opportunity to experience that, is when you're experiencing these stages of grief, when you feel like you're in these places, don't get stuck there. Process it, identify it, face it. Of course, have the courage to kind of work through it and talk through it and pray through it. And then trust God to use you in that acceptance place where He will make something significant out of this, and He will not let anything be wasted in the end. That's what I keep coming back to, is God will find a way to work through this for the good of those who love Him and use us as a light in the darkness.
One last word before we go.
So thanks for staying with us, and a couple closing remarks. Just remind you about...
Email us, centenary1911@gmail.com. We love hearing from you. Also, I feel absurd that, by the way, this is episode 18, Brian.
Wow.
And I've never mentioned, if you want to, you can also just comment on the YouTube page that you're watching this video through. So if you ever want to tell us something and you don't want to take the time to open up your email, whatever it is, you could just comment on the page.
Yeah.
Brian, why? 18 episodes in.
Well, sometimes we miss the obvious, Spen, so that's okay. It's quite all right. No worries. So, yeah, thanks for staying with us. When we started this, we thought it would be, just a fun thing to do for 2 or 3 weeks. And here we are, 18 episodes in. That's okay. So thanks for joining us. And yes, email us, comment on the YouTube. And then remember, every Friday, be looking for that Leaf Brief. It's our one place to go for all the information, the one-stop shop, the Costco of your information. You can find it all there.
Oh, I miss Costco.
Yeah, there you go. By the way, you can't find my green beans at Costco. I just like these canned green beans, and for some reason they're out always right now, so can't find that at Costco. Not sure why I ranted about that.
Come back here next week
okay.
when our main topic will be things that we can't find at stores anymore.
That's right. No, it won't. Join us again. Thanks for joining us. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
You have a lot to cut out of that mess. Jeez. Those cousins had driven 3 hours from her home. After working her full-time job and leaving her children and husband at home, she drove those hours to come visit my dad in the hospital, but also to visit us and to bring us food. Because in one of those situations where you're in such a crisis moment, you don't really eat well and you're not taking time to cook or prepare food.
I'm really sorry to interrupt. This is a different story? Does this involve a car?
Yes.
Because this story was featured on the podcast
Oh my
about
gosh.
8 weeks ago.
I don't remember that. I'm glad you said that. I totally forget.
I was like, should I
Oh
say
my gosh,
anything?
I'm glad
Am I
you
wrong?
interrupted. Okay, so we need to cut this whole thing out, man. My gosh, I totally forgot I told that story.
Out of respect to you, I will...
Thank you.
We actually...
Good
You
Lord.
told this story in the Grieve episode.
Oh, geez, I don't even remember that. Cut all this then.
Okay, it's gone.
Okay. That is funny. I literally have no
That's
memory of
really
that.
funny.
All right. No story.
Well,
Now I'm all rattled.
unless you're interested in telling the story of do you need to use the bathroom?
Oh, yeah, that would be
That's
kind
a
of funny.
fun one.
All right.
Okay.
Story time. The lockdown is bored. Make your clicks or do something so you know where this is.
Welcome to the first time we've attempted the story time segment today.
Yeah, exactly. So, most of you know I've had a number of surgeries in my life, and one of those famous